Hello, friends. This is Deanna Spingola, and as always, I am broadcasting from the very sunny Chicago suburbs, although it's not always very sunny, but for this last week, it's been great, up into the 70s. It's amazing. Weather's been very strange. A lot of things have been very strange. Anyway, I'm glad that you're listening to the program today. And I want you to remember that Yahoo Groups is disappearing on December 15th. So if you wish to remain on the email notification list, you need to subscribe at groups.io/G/Deanna Spingola. And I just posted that into the chat room. And I also will email you how you can subscribe on the website, as well as just sending an email. Anyway, I'm happy to be on republicbroadcasting.org, where I've been here for 10 years, and the time has just gone by so quickly. It's been wonderful. Anyway, I hope that you will subscribe to SpingolaSpeaks.net, where there is so much wonderful, wonderful information, and it's just a fabulous site. And I'm so grateful for the individual who runs that site, who spends a lot of time. He's put a lot of time into putting it together and maintaining it, and I just love him. He's just a terrific friend. I also hope that you will visit screeningsandyhook.net. Excuse me. And if you have questions or want to make comments during the program, just email comment or comments at spingola.email. It's the only time I ever look at that email address is 3 hours during the program. So if you email me during the week and I don't answer, don't get ticked off because I didn't look. I only use that email during the program. It's just dedicated to that purpose. I hope that you will join the people in the chat room at spingola.chatango.com. And as you know, I maintain a list of all the guests that I've ever had on the program, and also future guests that are scheduled. And all you have to do is visit spingola.com, click on the radio schedule button on the left, and see what's coming up and what people we've had on in the past. And today we have a guest on the program that I've had the pleasure of interviewing previously, and his name is Robert K. Wilcox, and his website is robertkwilcox.com. Bob, welcome to the program.
Hey, Deanna, how are you?
I'm just really good. I'm very good. And you have a new book that we're going to be talking about also. But the first book that I read of yours is Target Patton, which was just an amazing book. And so many people aren't aware of what happened and his courage and so many other things that why he didn't come back from Europe, and there were a lot of really, really good reasons, right?
Yeah, the book puts forth my belief that he was murdered. It was an assassination, and that's always been kept quiet. Of course, we have in the government they do bad things, and in World War II. Killing became so usual that it was one way to get rid of somebody who wanted to mess up the plans that the government had. But that's just my thoughts on it. Whenever you want, I can start telling you how the whole thing developed, because it's quite a story.
Right. And I've read other things. The Patton papers, and other things that corroborate everything that you've talked about in the book. And when you look at all the circumstances of what Eisenhower did or didn't do. He pretty much sold out. He sold out the country. He sold out people who were fighting communism, the spread of communism. He basically sold out to the communists, in my opinion, and allowed them to come in and rape everybody in Germany from the age of 8 until to 80. It was awful. But anyway, go ahead.
That occurred, but you know, the FDR administration was very thick with the Russians. For some reason, FDR thought that Stalin was going to be a great savior to the world. I don't know where in the world he got that, but it was probably that he thought, okay, they're the big power, and if the two of us get together, we can save the world. But that administration was rife with Russian influence, and that's where they went wrong there, and that's why I think Patton ultimately died. But let me just start out and say that you know how I got onto this. I'm a journalist. I'm a book writer, really, by trade. I've written 12 books, and I'm always looking for a good book. And that was really all that brought this on. I'm always looking for a good book, and I was working out with my cousin, Tim Wilcox, who at the time had an international detective agency, and it was in Indianapolis. I live in Los Angeles. He was out here to visit me, and we were out working out in the mountains and just running and that kind of stuff and talking about stuff. And he, in his job, he has the occasion to hire ex-CIA guys, people who were deeply involved in the spy world and so on. So I guess we were talking about something about Patton, and I had the usual opinion that Patton had died in an accident. And he says, oh, no. He says, Patton was murdered. I said, what are you talking about? He says, oh, I know the guy who murdered him.
Oh, my gosh.
I said, what do you I never heard this before. How could this was, 10 years ago, something like that. And I'd never heard this. And, you know, Patton was our greatest general, greatest fighting general. I would say only Washington was in his category. I mean, when we needed a victory, you went to Patton, and he did it for you. And it wasn't, you know, his nickname was Blood and Guts, but that nickname was really put on him because it wasn't that he caused blood and guts, although he did. It was that he was so fast, and he believed that if you hit them fast, hit them hard, you'll do the least amount of damage to your own people. It's like in a street fight, you know, you got to knock them down, hit them down, and keep them down. And that's the way he was, and that's why he got that blood and guts thing. But he was a very smart guy and a very prescient person. He all the time could see what was going to happen before him, and he would make the right move. So I think he could have actually. Well, I know he could have actually ended it sooner if they hadn't stopped him at the border at Germany. But I'll get into that in a second. But anyway, so here's my cousin saying this to me, and wow, this is a book if it's true. And I got Tim to arrange a meeting with Bazada with me, and I want to say that Bazada never would have told me what he did if he hadn't had a stroke, which he had, and I got him at that time. But anyway, what a fascinating character this man Douglas Bazada was. He was a big guy. He'd been a boxing champ for the Marine Corps in the 30s. Very smart, very interesting guy. Good looking. I thought he looked like a British colonel to me, except for a Jersey accent, because he'd grown up in Jersey and he had that kind of accent. And he'd been at Jedburgh in World War II. For those of you who don't know who the Jedburghs were, they were our first special forces, the very first. and they were organized. These were tough guys, smart guys, who were dropped into France, in occupied France, parachuted in there to organize the Maquis and to get them to start hitting all the Germans. There were 1 million Germans in France at that time. And then also to, at the time of D-Day, to make sure that they hit them the hardest, because with those 1 million Germans in there, if they'd gotten up to the sea line there, they could have changed it and beaten us back. So those were their two purposes, and he did that. He was one of those guys. There were very few of them, and they would go in 3-man teams, one an American, one a Frenchman, and one something else from somewhere else, and they organized. So after the war, Bozzato became a Cold War spy and assassin. He organized a group, and they would work for the CIA and other countries as well. These groups would do things that the CIA couldn't do, that the other groups couldn't do. They'd go into Russia and they'd kidnap people or kill people. And,
oh, gosh.
You know, this is he was an assassin for the OSS, and they killed Americans that they thought were treasonous as well. So he had this long background: Cold War spy, assassin, and he wasn't just some guy. He eventually ended up with John Lehman, who was the Secretary of the Navy under the Reagan administration, working for him. So this was no run-of-the-mill guy.
Yeah.
And I spent 2 weeks with him in Washington, where he lived. As I said, he just had a stroke. He never would have told me this stuff in a million years. He was a very closed-mouth spy-type guy, but when I found him, he was ready to talk. I was just very lucky there. So he told me the following story. In a series of meetings with OSS head Wild Bill Donovan, the head of the OSS, that he was finally asked to kill Patton. And it started off very slow during the war. And slowly, they wanted to slow down Patton. Patton performed one of the most, it was the fastest victories that America had ever seen. After D-Day, and by the way, Patton was supposed to land on D-Day and run the troops in there, but Patton was always saying what he thought, and he had undermined, he had said something bad about the Soviets at some gathering. It was very off the cuff and very minor, but they you can't do that, and they punished him for it, and they took him out from leading the D-Day troops, where he was originally put, to being a decoy, which turned out to be a great idea, because the Germans, they didn't care what anybody was doing except for Patton. Where's Patton? That became their mantra. Oh. Where's Patton? And we put Patton in an area away from where the troops were going to go across, where they were going to do D-Day. So the Germans were outfoxed in that sense. But anyway, once D-Day started, he was then put into leading our troops once we'd grabbed a foothold there. And he made this fantastic dash across the top of France and got to the German border, and they stopped him. And why did they stop him? Because for good relations, Montgomery, the British colonel, who was our big ally, he wanted to do something which was a plan to drop parachutists up in northern Germany, come down and get Berlin and end the war fast. Well, it didn't work out. It's called the Bridge Too Far plan, and they stopped Patton. And Bozzato, the first part of his stop Patton orders were to steal the gas from Patton's tanks, and they did that. He organized that, and they stole gas from Patton's tanks, and he couldn't go anywhere. He stopped right at the German border. So that was, that stopped him right there, and he could have gone on. I think he very easily could have ended the war, because the Germans were in disarray at this moment. We had knocked them out at D-Day. They were running for their lives back to Germany. There was an incident called the Falaise Gap, where Patton had a lot of them. This is 400,000 of the Germans' best troops running back to Germany. He had caught them at Falaise, about halfway going, and he wanted to kill them, and Montgomery, who was slow and plodding, couldn't ever close the vise. And they got away. And these are the same guys who came back and hit us at the Battle of the Bulge. Well, by the end of the war, Patton was no longer liked by anybody. They used him. He was always doing things like he didn't like the Russians. He was the highest ranking German general in Germany, and he was running things in Germany. And he would do things like, well, this ex-Nazi, who really wasn't a Nazi, he was more of a great engineer. He knew how to run the sewer system, so I'm going to keep him in there. And they cashiered him for that, and they put him away. Wow. And so, in the early months after World War II, in Germany, as we're occupying Germany, Patton was sent to a place where it was very embarrassing for him, where he was supposed to write the history of the war. In effect, what they did was get him out of everybody, right, get him away from the press, get his crazy ideas out of the way. And they've sent him up to this, to where it was, it's slipping my mind right now, but somewhere in Germany. And he was just supposed to end the war there. Well, Patton was mad as hell, and he wanted to, he knew secrets. He knew how they had stopped him. He thought it was because of Montgomery, but it really was also because the OSS took his gas as well. But he knew something was wrong. He wanted to go back. He wanted to tell the full story and write a book about it, and also run for office. He was going to fight. The biggest thing he wanted to do was he wanted to go fight the Soviets. He said they're down. They fought a war. We could beat them right now. He didn't want to go and conquer Russia. What he wanted to do was push them back from the areas that they'd come, to drop the Iron Curtain, which would soon become very apparent. For 6 months, we kind of thought they were our friends, that this was a good thing, and so on.
I don't understand how that could have occurred with Holodomor and just the entire situation, and also how the communists took over Russia in 1917, and the history of the 5-year plans that killed so many people. And then the United States government, through Lend-Lease, actually funded the Soviet Union. And as you brought up FDR. And in one of my books, I call him the Red in the White House, because, as you mentioned, he had a lot of communists in his administration.
Absolutely, and he had so many communists there that they really ran things. I mean, I'll get into that in a second there, but so let me get back to Bazada. He's finally told, and when they give a kill order like this, they will never say, go kill somebody. What happened was, he told me, that Donovan would wring his hands and say, oh, gee, Patton was such a great asset for us, but now he may ruin everything that we've set up, this new world order where Russia and so on. This is before the Iron Curtain has been declared. It was happening, and Patton could see it. And so he said, well, I don't know what to do.
Bob,
all right, I'll hold that.
It's a good time for a break. We'll be right back. Just hold that thought. We're right in the middle of here. Okay, we'll be right back. Stay with us, folks.
Starts with you and me. It starts with you and me. We all can be heroes if we take the lead.
All righty, we are back. We are back with our guest, Robert K. Wilcox. His website is robertkwilcox.com. Wilcox. The last name is spelled Wilcox. Okay, pick up where you left off. We're writing that.
Okay, and I want to say that all of this is in my book, Target Patton, so much more detail about it. But
exactly.
So Douglas Bazada was told by Wild Bill Donovan, we've got to do something, but oh goodness. And Bazada, having been through this before, an assassin for the OSS, he says, "Don't worry, Bill Donovan, I'll take care of it," which is the way it's done. It's never put in writing or anything.
Oh, of course not.
It was through this meeting. So now Bazada told me that he liked Patton and he didn't want to do this, but he thought to himself, if I don't say I will, they'll get someone else and they'll kill me. So he had a big dilemma there, but there's also another aspect to anyone who does these kinds of things, is an assassin and so on. And during the war, as I said, it's so easy, and the killing becomes a natural thing. I'm convinced that in knowing Douglas, there's almost a Jekyll and Hyde part of him, and once he got the order and once he realized he had to do it, then he switches into the other mode of get the job done. And he was a total man of action. He didn't want anybody with him. He didn't want anything to do with it. He wanted to do it and do it fast. And that's what he did. And Patton was scheduled. This is around in December. This is December 9th that the accident occurs. Patton is scheduled to leave the next day, and some of his aides decide to go out on a hunting trip in near Mannheim in a foresty area near Mannheim, and he's to go down there just the day before he leaves. And Bazada said he followed him through there. When they stopped, Patton had a great interest in history, and they stopped at a castle. He waited until they were in, Bazada did. He waited till they were inside the castle. They're up on the mountains and so on. You can hide and sneak up and all this. And he went and the Cadillac that they were in, this is a Cadillac touring car that Patton had. He rolled down the window and fixed it so it couldn't be rolled up. And then he followed them down. They're on the Autobahn. The Germans had that, and they had freeways before we ever did. And they're on the Autobahn, and they come off, and they go to Mannheim. They take the cutoff to Mannheim. Mannheim is about five miles away, and they're on this lonely road. And they stop at a railroad track, and up ahead. All the reports say there's a truck up there, and it's waiting on the other side of this lonely road. There's nothing else on either side of it, just a lonely road and a truck up there. Well, they start up again, and as they start up, the truck starts up, and they're going towards each other on opposite lanes, and suddenly, in maybe 300 yards from where that started, the truck suddenly turns in front of him, and only Patton ends up with a broken neck from this, and Bazada said he shot not a penetrating bullet, but a non-penetrating bullet through the window. And by the way, Bazada has the record at Fort Benning as the greatest shot there ever was. This was duck soup for him. He was behind a bunch of old wrecks and so on, all along these streets, not streets, but this road outside of Mannheim. There's debris from the war, and he was in behind there. And he's also got a someone who met him there, who he says was a Russian. It's a little bit more involved than that, but anyway. So they're going down this lonely road, and this accident occurs, and suddenly he's got a broken neck. There are three people in the car. One is the driver, and one is his aide. General Gay is on the other side. Neither of them are even harmed at all. Only Patton has a broken neck, There's blood coming out from his head where he must have hit something as he went down, and he got away. And I mean, he fell down. They immediately, which is very strange, hundreds of people come out. I mean, must have been 100. Where did they come from? These were investigators, so they just came very, very quickly. So this is a very, very strange accident that occurs, and I go to the National Archives after talking with Douglas Bozada, and I want to find out about the Bozada first, and then the accident, as I dig into Bozada and find what I can on him, which was there was some good information there. He turns out to be very sterling. He's a very decorated Jedburgh. He's all on the up and up. So that was very, very interesting to me. But as I got to the accident, that's where it began to become very suspicious. Not only is it sort of a lonely, deserted road, and then all these people come out of it, but suddenly the truck, the people in the truck, a man named Thompson, who's there, who's known as a kind of nefarious character. He's an army sergeant. He did a lot on the black market. He disappears. And nobody knows where he is. He's just gone. It turns out he's flown to England, and also
we have a quick break. We'll be right back.
Starts with you and me. It starts with you and me. We all can be heroes.
All righty, we are back, and our guest is Robert K. Wilcox. And we're talking about Patton. So pick up where you left off. It was just we were right.
Yeah. So we have this strange accident, a lonely road. There's a truck on the side. It suddenly turns in front of Patton. He is injured, and the guy driving it, and there are two other people in it, and we never find out who they are. The guy driving it is whisked away to London, it eventually turns out. At the time, he just vanishes, and so does the Jeep driver who was leading Patton's caravan there, which was his Cadillac and another car that had the guns and so on. His name was Scrusy. He disappears, which is very, very strange. He's leading them. You know he would have heard it. Why didn't he come back? He was just a little bit ahead of them. And Patton is injured. He's paralyzed from the neck down. He's not taken to Mannheim, which is 5 miles away, but taken about 50 or 60 miles away to Heidelberg, nearly an hour away. So he's taken there. It's a long, long time. Why was that? Now, maybe Heidelberg was a bigger hospital, so maybe so. And at the hospital, they bring him, when he's brought in, he's in bad shape. He's paralyzed from the neck down, and he requests a guard when they finally get him ready and put him in a bed and so on, and to treat him and so on. He requests a guard out. Nobody's ever been figured out why he did that, but nevertheless, in about 2 weeks, he makes a miraculous recovery, and he's doing so well. He gets the feeling back in his legs and somewhat in his arms and so on. He's feeling so well. He says, "I want to go home," and they're going to fly him home, which in 1945, at the end of 45, is no easy journey. It's like a 20-hour journey in a helicopter, in a propeller plane, and so on. So he's getting ready to do that, and the day before he leaves, he has a sudden setback and dies that night of an embolism. Now, when you're cooped up in a bed, you can get an embolism. It's from no walking around or anything. But still, there's no autopsy. this is the highest-ranking journal in the theater, and they don't have an autopsy. That is really, really incredible. And I'm finding all this stuff out as I'm reading through this thing and so on. The biggest thing that happened when I went to the National Archives was, despite all of this that I've told you, there are no reports about the accident at the National Archives. They've all vanished. I know for sure there are at least 5 reports mentioned in newspaper things and other things which write about the reports, possibly 8 of them, but they've all vanished. Again, this is the highest-ranking general in Europe, and there are no reports about the accident. There's something going on here. This is a cover-up. This is really, really a cover-up, it seems to me. And I've got a book. At least I've got the beginnings of a really good book for that. And I then really started digging into Patton himself, and I read all I could about what he thought and who he was and so on. He had written a book called War as I Knew It. And I found out that book, which you can read, most people have it who know about Patton, War as I Knew It. It's a great book. It's his diary is what it was. It was censored. His wife came back with that book with all kinds of secrets in it. And the authorities, one of whom was, I can't remember his name, but he was a friend of theirs, and he said, listen, we can't allow this to be printed. It shows bad decisions by Dwight Eisenhower, incredibly bad decisions by Eisenhower.
Yeah.
He set up rest and recuperation places in the Battle of the Bulge in the Argonne Forest, which almost got us losing Europe because that's where the Battle of the Bulge came down, and Patton kept saying, don't do it, don't do this. The Germans are doing something over here. They could come and get us. And forget it, we'll set it up. And sure enough, they attacked. He knew a lot of things that he was going to tell in this, and it was all censored. His wife, Patton's wife, went ahead as anybody would when the authorities say don't print all this, and she did it. And so this War as I Knew It, while it's a great book about how he thought and so on, it doesn't tell you the big things that he wanted to do. And I frankly, I needed more. And in my research, I found something which really looked good. It was Stephen Skubik's testimony. And Stephen Skubik was a counterintelligence corps agent. These were sort of the FBI of the CIA, and although the CIA wasn't even founded then, but of our Army. They went in right after the war, and they started looking behind the Iron Curtain, and some people were very suspicious of the Russians, and this is what he was doing. Skubik was. He was he had been born in one of the Iron Curtain countries, but he came here as an orphan, and became a counterintelligence corps. He was an American by then, and he had an East European background. So he got in to people like the Ukrainians who were behind the Iron Curtain, and he began to hear reports that Stalin wanted Patton dead. And he got these from people like Stefan Bandera, who was a Ukrainian freedom fighter against the Soviets. Bandera was later killed by the Soviets, and professors who were against the Soviets and their takeover of Ukrainian life and so on, which they had done before. But and he published a book. It was a self-published book, only for his family, really. It was called The Murder of Patton. And when I found this book, it was amazing. Skubik was not a writer. It was not well written, but it was a gem of information. I went through and outlined it, and it was terrific. It told me so much that I needed to know. And eventually, Skubik, finding this out, he went to Donovan, of all people. Well, not of all people. Donovan was there in Europe at the time. He went to him and said, Donovan, you've got to realize that they want to kill Patton. This is before Patton's accident. This is in the months after the war, but before Patton's accident. And Donovan, to his surprise and fear, threw him in jail, threw Skubic in jail. And this is one of our bona fide agents. He throws him in jail, threatens him, and says he just better stop all this, that this is ridiculous and we're not going to hear about it. And Skubic got scared. They let him out, and Skubic went home and lived undercover, in America for 2 or 3 years, feeling he was going to be murdered because he'd uncovered this plot. Of course, as soon as he got out of jail, they did murder Patton, or at least Patton died under funny circumstances, which especially Skubic knew about. So he thought he was going to be killed because of it, and he lived in fear for several years. Well, again, Skubic turns out to become an advisor to Reagan. He got with the communities from that had left behind the Iron Curtain and became a prominent figure there, and eventually was an advisor to many of those countries under Ronald Reagan. So I've got now 2 credible witnesses. This was not just some dumb guy. This was a guy placed in a position to learn this and the story that he told. So I have both Bazada, who was involved in the accident, confessing that he caused it, with an NKVD agent. I don't know if I said anything about that, but when Bazada finally set that accident up, there was another guy with him. He called him the Pole, but he was from behind the Iron Curtain, and he was another assassin. And I imagine, I fully believe that was part of what the NKVD was involved with this, with Bazada, and that was logical. They wanted him dead, no question that the Soviets wanted him dead, Patton, because they knew he was going to go back home and start talking against them. So anyway, these are 2 very credible witnesses. Now, it of course occurs, well, what in the world is Donovan doing? Well, how could Donovan do this? Well, motive, first of all, was the easiest part. Patton wanted to start World War III. He knew all these damning secrets at Falaise, how Montgomery had screwed things up, at the Battle of the Bulge, how Eisenhower had screwed things up. Imagine if they'd have let, and how they'd stolen his gas. Imagine if they'd have let Patton go through and continue chasing those guys. The Battle of the Bulge might not have happened. We might have defeated the Germans, maybe even in 1944, at the end of 1944. Imagine all the mothers whose sons wouldn't have died in all of that. I mean, it was.
Yes.
I mean, it's amazing that all these secrets that he knew, and he was about to tell these. Well, why would Donovan, cover this stuff up? Well. The fact was that Donovan was very, his motive, I found out later, was, he was all for himself. He wanted to be head of the CIA, and he was therefore very keen to do whatever the FDR administration, which was riddled with communists, wanted. As we've said before, the FDR administration, FDR leading it, and now Truman taking over, they wanted to do this. They wanted to establish this world order where everything would be fine. For some reason, FDR was always chummy with the Soviets, and he really believed that Stalin was a good guy and would keep the world together. And if Donovan is going to get anything that he wants, he's going to have to be chummy with the Soviets. And in fact, that's what he did. Early in the war in 42, he literally went hat in hand, Donovan did, to the NKVD, the Soviets, saying, oh, here, let me help you. I know a lot about, things that are going on, and you guys can help us, and we can be friends. That was Donovan's motive. Well, I've kind of skipped over it, but let me get right to it, which is something that you, Deanna, know very well, that how the FDR administration was riddled with communists.
Right.
Lawrence Dugan, I've got a list here in front of me of them. He was a State Department guy, probably second in command there. He was a spy providing information to the NKVD. He was later probably murdered. Harry Dexter White was in Treasury. He was a spy there. Lachlan Curry was a White House aide of FDR's. He was a spy. Harry Hopkins was one of FDR's best friends and closest aide. He'd been a big friend of the Soviets, had done many things for them. Henry Wallace, who was the VP until FDR's latest. He was voted in, I think, 3 times, and his FDR finally got rid of him because he was so bad. He was so friendly with the Russians. He had gone there, and the Russians just duped him. He was a dope. He didn't. They did things like take him to concentration camps where they had orchestras there and little plays. They kept everything away from him, all the bad stuff, and he believed it. Duncan Lee was Donovan's close friend and secretary. He was a spy sending information that they were getting from in the OSS to the Soviets. And of course, everyone knows Alger Hiss. That was the big one when it finally began to come out that there were so many communists. And Alger Hiss in the State Department was arrested, tried, and found guilty, not of spying, although that was why they brought him in, but of some lesser one. And let me explain why we never heard about this. We had, during the war, an operation called Venona. Venona was we were listening to the Russians. We actually tapped into them through our spy network. This is a way to listen to them. And Venona was telling us all this. We knew these guys were this way, but it was so top secret that we could not arrest them or stop them. I don't know what they did in addition, but they could not let it out. The Soviets found out about it right after the war, so Venona was over, and that's how we now know about Venona. It's Venona, not Verona, but Venona. And then there was a spy.
Rhymes with Corona?
Pardon?
Rhymes with Corona?
Please, I don't know, but that's a good observation.
We won't go
here.
Okay.
Corona was our spy this time, and not ours, but those who wish to take over our government.
Right.
But in any case, there was a spy who decided to turn on the Soviets. Her name was Elizabeth Bentley.
Oh.
And Elizabeth Bentley, at the same time that this Venona stuff was coming out, she began to tell on these guys, and she had a turn of heart or something. You can look her up. But she really scandalized everything, and she said there are communists throughout the government. Here's some of them, and by the way, when I went back in preparation for our program today to just spruce myself up, it's amazing the whitewash you get. They aren't telling you this anymore about what I'm telling you. They don't tell you about the communists and all the FDR. Of course, you know what was his name? McCarthy. McCarthy may have been a drunk,
McCarthy, right?
But you know, I'm convinced he had this Venona information. That's where he got his information. Mm-hmm. He knew it, and he couldn't tell either. And that's where whatever his personal life was, he knew about this as well. So anyway, Donovan was part of this alliance with the Soviets. He covered up what Skubik had found out, and of course had asked Douglas Bazada to kill. Had arranged that. Mm. So he's the farthest I got, but someone was ahead of him. Someone higher than Donovan, which is only the very top. The president, who knows which one, but that's where the real orders came from. So I had all of this together, and I knew I had a book, and then I began to find, with this, digging through this, more evidence. And should we take a break, or
yes,
or should I go on?
No, we do have to take a break. Sorry. We'll be right back in 3 minutes. All right, we are back with our guest, Robert K. Wilcox. And, okay, pick up where you left off.
Okay. So I've finally got firsthand accounts now. I've got witnesses and, good evidence that this was going on. Douglas Pizzata and Skubik, both of whom did not know each other, had no account from two different sides. I'm getting the same story, and I can see now. I'm learning how riddled with communists, the FDR administration. I see why Patton why they would want to kill Patton and to get him out of this, because after the war he's going to tell all the secrets. And I'm now just looking for more evidence now, and I'll tell you something real quick that I found, which was very, very interesting, and more to this to the same evidence. I didn't know it, but Patton's life had been threatened 3 times earlier before this happened, and there was, if you've ever seen the Patton movie, which is a great movie, Patton,
yes,
it shows one of the incidences. This is where, towards the end, all of these are at the very end of the war, when he's not needed anymore, and I think they want to get rid of him, but a cart comes roaring down. It looks like a vegetable cart or something. Somebody sent it down an alley, and Patton's walking by, and it nearly decapitates him because it's got one of those scythe things. You see, the Grim Reaper has it, and it nearly cut his head off. But he just, who knows what that was? Some kind of accident. And then he's in a Jeep, and somebody tried to swipe him off the road. This is in October 45 that happened. But the big one that was really, really telling is that on April 20th, 1945, Patton used to have a little airplane that he would fly. He had a pilot, and he would fly in it over his troops so he could get a bigger picture. And he was doing that. This is April 20th, right before the war ends, and it's in Germany. The Russians are all around there, and so on. And suddenly, he's attacked by a Spitfire, and this Spitfire was in a flight of 4 or 5 planes, and they're above him, and the 3 or 4 Spitfires are circling above, and one of them dives down and tries to shoot his plane down. And luckily, he's got a great a pilot, and the pilot dives down in the mountains, and the Spitfire can't follow. I think the Spitfire crashes. I can't remember whether that's the way it happened or not, but I think it crashes. But anyway, Patton was trying to take pictures of it, and he was so rattled that he didn't have any film, and so they didn't get that. But these were 3 suspicious attempts on his life before that. But let me jump ahead and say that as I'm looking at everything I've got, the one thing that I wanted to do, I heard that the Patton car, this Cadillac that he was injured in, was at Fort Knox, where they have a Patton wing of the Fort Knox. And I said, wow, this is terrific. I can go there and do my job. I can look at the car, see what the evidence see the blood in the car, all that kind of stuff, and really get a good idea. Well, I called GM's, that's General Motors' Cadillac history expert, who works for them. His name was Matt Larson, and he said he'd meet me at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and we could go through this. And the Fort Knox was very nice. They said, well, sure, you guys, I guess you've got a legitimate reason. We'll let you. It's roped off. If you're just a regular person coming to the museum, you can't go in and look at the exhibit or anything. But they let us in there. So we're sitting there, and I go into the car, and the first thing I notice is there's no blood on the car. It's spotless. It's very, very good, which is against what I knew had happened there. There was blood all over the place. And from Patton's bleeding nose, and he'd hit himself on the forehead and the nose, and it turns out on the side of the car, in my opinion, on the door there where he was looking out the window. But and then Larson starts telling me, I don't think this is really a 38 series. He was in a 1938 Series 75 Cadillac limo, and Larson starts saying, this doesn't really look, they're very similar, but there are little things, and he starts pointing them out to me, different ashtrays and a different line across the front. And so we started looking at it more deeply, and down, every... Okay, I'll hold on.
We're at the top of the hour. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Public Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.
All righty, we are back, and our guest today, and we get him for the whole program, all 3 hours, is Robert K. Wilcox. His website is robertkwilcox.com. He's talking about his book, Target Patton, which is a story that I don't think that people are aware of. It's just an incredible story, and you've covered it so magnificently in your book. It is terrific. You're just a great researcher. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks a lot. And I think I believe Patton was assassinated, murdered, because of what he knew, and that's something that has been covered up for many years, but hopefully it will eventually come to lessen. So I left off where we had gone to find his car, because I thought that that would show me stuff, and we're seeing that there are strange anomalies that indicate this may not be his car at Fort Knox, the one that you can go and see right now. They put it on there, but my Cadillac expert from Detroit says no, there's something strange about it. And then we look down on the every car has a framework and not scratched, but carved into the metal down at the bottom. Pardon?
Right.
Yeah, scratched into the metal is in the framework there is what's called a VIN. It's a vehicle identification number. Every car has it, so that they can always trace any car. And the VIN it's all scratched out. How do you say, with a file? It's been filed out. Obviously, someone doesn't want anyone to know the VIN number of this supposed car, which was supposed to have been the one that Patton had the accident in. And in fact, eventually, Matt Larson, my GM Cadillac history expert, said this is not a 1938 series; it's a 1939.
Oh.
So they've got a fake car there. Why have they got a fake car there? And I don't think the museum knows it. I don't think they knew anything about it, nor have they ever said they did to me. But we told them, and they didn't know what to do. I haven't been back there, but they've never come back to me, so I know they've either changed it or said this is a likeness or something. It's a fake. Why would you put a fake car there? You would do that because either somebody sold the real one to some collector, that's the only thing I can think of, or more probably, if you were able to see the real car, you would find out all kinds of things that would add up to this was not an accident, and that's what I think happened. And by the way, the Soviets, I don't think I said this, but Bazada told me that when he went to the hospital, that is Patton, after the accident, he didn't go to the hospital to finish the job, but the Soviets did. He said they went in and used a poison that would mimic this thing that Patton is said to have died of. I'm blanking on it right now, but embolism.
Right.
And it's a poison that would disintegrate fairly soon. And we've of course seen numerous instances of this later, as the Soviets have done the same thing with people. Remember the guy that they used an umbrella and they stuck it in his leg? He thought he'd just been bitten by a mosquito or something. Right. And they kill people this way. And anyway, it's interesting to note that one of Patton's relatives, I think it's a granddaughter, yes, while she was in Europe, she was accosted by a supposed Soviet agent, and he said, I want you to know he was killed that way. It was they got in the hospital, and you know the Russians loved that death by accident because by car accident. Stalin especially, he killed many people that way in all over the Europe. The reason being that it's an accident first. Nobody knows what's going on, and if the guy survives, as Patton did, you can go into the hospital and nobody will know the difference. You put on a coat, you know, like you're a doctor. You can go into any room, and that's what they did. This agent had told one of Patton's relatives. So the Russians hated him. This was all known. There's famous. If you saw the movie about Patton, there's a famous scene where he and Zhukov, who was the big Russian general, are toasting each other, and they kind of lock arms, and Zhukov says something to the effect of, "You great general, you great American general," and Patton looks down at it and says, "You son of a bitch." So, wow. I mean, that's in the movie. I mean, the fact that he hated him is very clear. And in fact, in truth, they actually had almost a race during a parade once to see who could get first. They were both roaring in on their cars and so on. So let me end this by saying that Donovan, when he never did get the head of OSS, he was kind of in bad shape by the end of the war and never did get what he wanted. And when that became clear, Donovan, and this is a fact, he frantically burned a lot of OSS papers. He and his aide did this for 3 days. They burned things. So we never really get the full picture of what OSS had in its files. They were gone by 1948. At the least. I want to say that if you want the full story here, you need to get the third edition, not the third edition, the paperback edition of my book with the red around it. And the reason is this, that, pardon?
Right. Yeah.
Because that has the most information. And one of the things it has is the following. I'll tell you this story. After the hardback had been published, and it got a lot of play, except in certain circles, which panned it and said, no, this can't be true, and so on. I got a phone call from a Canadian. His name was Bert Rusin, and he was a very well-known businessman in Canada. And he said, I just want you to know that I have lived in fear since I left Germany as a young boy, and I never was going to come out with anything about what I'm about to tell you until your book came out. But now I guess I can. And what he told me was that he had been a young, like a 17-year-old kid when Germany had lost the war, and Eisenhower had taken that famous train that Hitler used to travel all around Germany, and had made it his headquarters. And this kid, Bert Rusin, was the steward who would serve them lunch in the train. They had a special car that they would that Ike and his staff would have. And he said one day we were at, like on October, we were at the station somewhere in Germany, and Patton came, and Ike went outside, and I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see that they were arguing. And Ike and was swearing his fist at him, and Patton was saying, no, it's not true. And Patton finally just did an about face and walked away. And then Eisenhower came into the train, into that car, his special car, right in front of Rusin, and said, "That bastard, I don't know what we're going to do. He's going to ruin everything. He's determined." Pardon me. And then they went to the special area where they ate lunch, and there was a curtain that was drawn across. So half the car was curtained and half wasn't. Bert was on the other side. He couldn't see them, but he heard them over here, and Dwight Eisenhower was saying the same thing. What are we going to do about this guy? We've got to do something about him. And all of a sudden, one of the voices pops up and says, "Don't worry, we'll handle it. Don't worry." Wow. And it ended right there. And Rusin says, I didn't know what they were talking about, but I was scared. That sounds really bad. And he said, then after Patton died in the hospital, the coffin was brought to the train, and I looked at it, and it's the first time Rusin said, I didn't know he died, and it said General Patton and so on, and I thought, oh my God, they killed him. And Patton is buried over in somewhere in Belgium or something. It's not he was never brought back. His remains were kept with his troops. He wanted to be buried there. And none of the high staff ever came to his funeral or anything like that.
Wow.
Eisenhower didn't go, et cetera, et cetera. So
really
that's in the opening, the new opening of the new book. But I just wanted to tell you that the red signaled one, the one that has the red around it, the paperback, is the one to get. So that's sort of it in a nutshell, and I'm open to questions.
That's the one I listed on the schedule page. There's a question in the chat room. He says, I heard a story about Patton near the end of the war where he pulled a soldier up out of his hospital bed, slapped him around. Wait, maybe that wasn't the right one.
Yeah, that's a famous incident.
Okay, so tell us about that.
Yeah, I know about that. That was, I think it was after they'd just made a foothold in the continent, in Europe, and that got him into a lot of trouble. Patton he loved his soldiers. He loved courage, and he felt very, very keen about it. And if he thought someone was dodging that, he became obsessed. And he was at a like a hospital place, and it used to be called shell shock, but I don't know what they call it now. Something PD, some kind of thing, post-traumatic. But anyway, he ran into a soldier who had that, it appears, and this soldier just was shaking and scared, and it offended Patton. And he shouldn't have done it. He knew that, but he got so mad because, remember, this is a guy who sees people's guts all over the street, and after he sent them to war, and he used to cry over that. So anyway, Patton slapped the guy. He slapped him, I think, with his gloves, and he almost hit him with his fists. and they rushed him out. And this, of course, the press just blew it out of proportion, and it was all over the headlines. And so that got him in a lot of trouble. And it was one of the reasons that, you see, Patton wouldn't lie. He was one of those few people who wouldn't lie for his own betterment. He said the truth. Regardless of what was going to happen, he said the truth. And not that that was the truth, that this man was a coward. He wasn't. He was suffering from this post-traumatic thing.
Stress disorder.
In any case, that's what that story is about. It did occur, and it got Patton in trouble.
Another comment. Patton's wife stayed by his bedside except for once, briefly stepping outside to eat a sandwich for lunch. She came back and he was dead. Is that correct?
That's I know that exact what they said. It's not that curt. She was there, and he was suffering by then. It was hard, but he was okay. Excuse me, I have to back up. He was okay when she left. That's true. It was about an hour to 2 hours that she was gone for lunch. I don't know that she stepped outside and had a sandwich. That there is a report about that. That could be in Ladislaus Farrago's book. It could be in some of the other books, but it was a couple of hours. She came back, and he was struggling by then and couldn't get his breath and eventually died. That's what happened. So There was a period where he was alone there. He had guards outside, but there were also windows out there. And remember, this thing about going to a hospital after the accident, if you don't get him in the accident, you can go to the hospital. Any doctor or nurse could walk in there and do that.
Sure. All you have to do is put on a white coat and a stethoscope and walk in.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm sorry, what did you say? I didn't understand that.
All you have to do is put on a white lab coat and put a stethoscope on.
Absolutely. That's all you have to do. And it's done. It's been done before. I wrote another book called The Mysterious Deaths of Ann Arbor, one of my first books. Over 100 people were attacked by nurses. Of course, they were nurses, but all they did was go into unattended rooms and inject Pavulon, which is something you get once you're under. When you go to an operation, they inject this in your veins, and what it does is stops all movement from you, but doesn't stop your consciousness. Of course, they never give it to you unless you're under anesthesia, so you don't ever know that. And then they went and these people, you can't breathe. Your lungs don't work. So they had about 2 minutes and they couldn't scream. They just knew they couldn't breathe and they were going to die. So it's easy to do this in a hospital.
Right. Now, how come they killed all those people in Ann Arbor?
Well, that's a long story. Another book called The Mysterious... No, I'll tell you. The Mysterious Deaths of Ann Arbor. 2 Filipino nurses were arrested. They were brought to trial. There was a huge trial. This is back in the 70s, I think. It could have been the 80s. I'm not quite remembering the date. But the idea, it was a strange relationship between 2 nurses. I think it was a lesbian relationship, all of which, this was a veterans hospital. And the prosecution used the idea that they were mad at Americans and so on, and they were found guilty, but it was overturned. And the reason it was overturned, it finally came out, was that in the Philippines at that time, we wanted to keep our bases. And it was right at this time that those base agreements were being negotiated. So there's the very strong indication that it was overturned for political reasons. I don't know. I can't tell you. My book came out before the overturning. It was even before they were brought to trial. My book just told of the horror in that hospital, and that's what it was.
Wow.
Yeah, it is a wow, I'll tell you. It's a scary story.
Oh, my goodness. Well, when you look at what do they call it? The deaths caused by medical mistakes. What is it? What is that term?
You mean by medicine?
The deaths that are caused by medical intervention. More people die in hospitals.
Oh, I see what you mean. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah, a lot of people die from medical mistakes. So if somebody dies in a hospital, it could, because maybe they got the wrong thing. Maybe they got something else in their oxygen tube or something.
Well, that's what happened in this veterans hospital for a whole summer. There were these unexplained deaths, and nobody knew why these people were dying, and the leadership just wasn't good enough to go in and inspect it, and administering this, they would administer it through an IV, so it was easy to do. The patient could be sleeping. They'd stick it. The IV was already in the person, so all you did was come up. All the killer would do was come up, and this has been done before. Since then,
sure.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We have a break. We'll be right back.
Starts with you and me. It starts with you and me. We all can be heroes.
All right, we are back with our guest. And our guest today is Robert K. Wilcox. His website is robertkwilcox.com. And the word I was trying to think of is iatrogenic, which is death by medicine. And it's so easy to knock somebody off when they're in the hospital.
Boy, I've never heard that word, but it's a good one. It is. It's very easy to do so. And as I... these at least 2 books I've dealt with it, and it's just an easy way to do it. And the best way of this kind of assassination is make it look like an accident in a car accident. And if they don't do it, they're going to go to hospital, and then you get them there.
Oh. And he was going to come home and just tell what was going on in Europe, and he really had a lot to say, and it goes, as we mentioned before, it goes back to long before Eisenhower, and some people say, oh, he was going to come back and spill the beans about Eisenhower's affair with Kate Summersby. Well, that would hardly be the reason to kill somebody, right?
Absolutely.
So there's all kinds of reasons that people give, but even when you go back to Wilson, President Wilson, he funded the Soviets, I think, for $10,000. So people were building them up, including Standard Oil. They were they were building them up.
Patton had tremendous secrets to tell, and how badly the war was run.
Right, and what they were doing.
Everything from Falaise, how the guys who came at us later at the Battle of the Bulge, how they had been let out and were able to regroup and then come and hit us. And if that had happened and they'd gotten that foothold at the Battle of the Bulge, they would have kicked us off of Europe, and we would have had to fought the war again. We've had to invade Europe again, and Patton hated the Russians, and he knew how bad they were, and he wanted to go fight them, and that was anathema to the administration. We'd just been through 5 years of war, and we just couldn't do it. Actually, America 4, and the whole world 5, and they just didn't want to do it, and they also thought that it was going to work out right, and they soon learned it wasn't, that all of Europe was enslaved, and that's what Patton wanted to say. And
he said we were fighting the wrong enemy, and he thought that we should join with Germany to fight against the Soviets. And
he did. He actually kept some of the German soldiers, a couple of huge units of them and wanted to use them against the Russians. And, of course, that made everybody mad. And because in the administration, that is the FDR administration, I mean, they wanted to punish Germany so badly. There was even a proposal to castrate every German male so they could end the entire Germany. And it was looked at for a while by FDR, but it was just too ghastly to go along with.
Well, they had the Morgenthau Plan.
Yes, that was the Morgenthau Plan. That was part of it.
And they starved them. After the war in 1945 to 46, there were 5.7 million women and children that were starved to death, and that was the year that that food production, worldwide food production, was back to its pre-war, 97% back to its pre-war production, and yet they would not feed the Germans who were starving to death. And most of those 5.7 million were women and children. And it was the Allies that did that.
Oh yeah. I mean, we wanted to punish them, and that's what happened, and we allowed all that to happen. So,
a question in email: were there Jewish connections between Russia and communist sympathizers in the U.S.?
I don't know. I don't know what there was.
Well, I think you've already covered that because you talked about all of the people that was in the administration of FDR.
Yeah, there always. I mean, there could be. That does not come into my research in any way.
Okay.
You have people with various political inclinations and various backgrounds, and you can maybe find out what their religions are, but that did not come into my calculations in any way.
Okay, so you've got another book.
Yes. I have my current book out right now.
Oh, whoops.
Is,
okay. We're going to take a break.
Okay.
And then when we come back, we're going to talk about your brand new book.
Okay, good.
Reaching for a dream of peace.
Welcome back. Our guest is Robert K. Wilcox, and his website is robertkwilcox.com. Another question before we move on to your latest book. Let me back up here, about the death of Mrs. Patton. Apparently she was, let me find a post. There's a post in somebody wrote in the chat room, Mrs. Patton, when she came back home from Europe, was going to run for political office. Mrs. Patton was a very experienced equestrian. She was found with a broken neck. Is that true?
Yes, she did. That's not something that I really researched. I know this. I was going to say that was his. Patton had some girlfriends too, and but one of them killed herself when he spurned her. But
gosh.
And I was thinking of that, but yes, that's true. She did die while she was, I think, jumping these horses and had a broken neck. She was an author. She'd written several books. I never got the impression that it was a mysterious death. I think she fell off of her horse, and when you do that, that's going to be pretty damning. And she actually probably was paralyzed just like her husband. But I never thought that was in any way something to be investigated. It's a possibility, though. She was not satisfied with his death, and the fact that they did not do an autopsy. Now, the story behind that autopsy is this, that, and it's mysterious. Here's this great general. He dies in a hospital. He's the highest-ranking general in theater. They don't do an autopsy. And she wanted to, but they talked her out of it. Pardon?
Right. And
I'm about to tell you.
An autopsy. He should have had one.
She wanted to do an autopsy, and they talked her out of it. Now, who talked her out of it? Well, he had several surgeons and so on that were working with him, but one of them, and I forget his name, but he was the head guy, and he actually helped Patton before he died. And this head guy did a strange thing. He was doing secret communiques back to Eisenhower and Marshall. Marshall did not like Patton at all. Eisenhower had pretty soon, had by this time become a kind of an enemy of Patton too, but it wasn't so pronounced. But why would he be sending daily communiques to these guys? Well, you'd say, well, they want to know what's going on with him. Well, yeah, but he's in a hospital. He's out of the war. He's doing nothing. Yeah. And why was it secret? Why didn't they post those things? So there's some strangeness about what happened to him. And so his wife, when she when he was later, after everything died down, she had some investigators. She still thought something was strange. And she hired some private investigators to dig into if something had happened, whether he was murdered or not. And these investigators looked into it and said, no, we couldn't find anything. Well, my retort to that is, well, of course not. We've had 10 great writers and so on who've gone to look into this, and if it was as good as it looks, when you read my book, they weren't going to allow or leave any loose ends sitting around there. So I think they were duped too. But you never know. I could be wrong. I think you can go to I think you could take a circumstantial case right now to a court of law, and you would get an indictment. You would get an indictment against people, certain people involved in this, because of the evidence. Now, I once talked about this on a television show, a stupid show where they, in TV, they don't really go very deep. They already know what they want to do. I didn't know it, but they just wanted a good opening for it, so they used my book. And one of the guys on the show said to me, well, you can get an indictment of a ham sandwich.
Oh,
yeah, you might in some stupid court.
Discredit.
But in truth, it takes something to get an indictment.
Yes. But I think that they had you on the program to discredit the idea, and I think that's what the whole purpose of it was.
Well, it was pretty sinister because they never told me that they had already finished their show, and they needed a neat beginning. So they had me get on there, and they hadn't told me. So I'm totally in the dark about this. I think they're beginning their hunt. So they have me give all my material, quickly in a TV 5 minutes, so that they can begin their search. And their search was dumb as it could be. I can't tell you how stupid it was, and it discredited the show, not me. So I didn't.
Yes.
And that was later proven. Their show's gone, and my book still. My book is now actually selling more than it was when it came out. It's a best-selling book.
The reviews are fabulous.
It's got 450 reviews on Amazon right now. This is a book I wrote 10 years ago.
Right. Yep. And there are a lot of great reviews.
Yeah, there are tremendous reviews for it. So I mean, you can't get 100% reviews, or you'll get something like the box they dumped of Biden votes today. You know, that's not true. That's phony.
Right.
But if you get like 90% are good reviews, those are real.
Yes. Yep.
I live my life on reviews. Amazon runs my life.
Well,
it's unfortunate. It didn't used to be that way, but it is now.
It's unfortunate. I had my three books. My trilogy was on Amazon, and they censored the second book in my trilogy, and then they removed the paperback and the hardback of book 1 and book 3, and removed all the reviews. There were about 100 reviews.
Wow.
So I don't like Amazon. I use Amazon because, well, people like immediate gratification. It's nice to have something sitting on your front porch instead of going out to the store and shopping for something that might be hard to find. So they really have us kind of where they want us.
Well, in the book business, they have too much power, but it's the way it is. It's the way it is, and you have to deal with it. So that's what it is.
Exactly. Yes, unfortunately. But I wish that they had let me know before they did that, so that I could have at least copied the reviews and saved them, because and there were about 100 of them.
You're a cog in the wheel. They don't know you. You know, they don't care about whether you are, to help you or to do anything for you.
No, they don't
It's
care.
a big, tremendous operation, and probably a 24-year-old kid censored it.
Right. They probably got a couple of complaints, criticisms, and they were gone just like that.
Well,
but
you need to keep it out. You have to just go get. Luckily, there probably is someone else who will put it out. Probably is out.
Oh yeah, and there are other places.
Yeah, you have to do that.
Get it, but still, all the reviews are gone, and they just should have let me know that they were going to do that.
Sure. Well, they're not going to do that.
Well, they're not going to do that.
No.
They're not known for their for their sensitivity.
Well, it's just too big. It's bigger than personal. It's a huge machine, and it just runs right over you.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of big machines.
Now on to the second one, huh?
Yes, Japan's Secret War, and you pick it up in Korea. And you think, oh yeah, there used to be a whole Korea. There used to be a whole Vietnam. There used to be a whole, a lot of countries. And now we have North, South, and, started with the United States. North against the South. So it's all this division. But anyway, tell us about Japan and their secret war.
Okay. The book's title is Japan's Secret War. This is the new book. It's a third edition, greatly revised and updated, and the subtitle is How Japan's Race to Build Its Own Atomic Bomb Provided the Groundwork for North Korea's Nuclear Program. Japan, it's not known in this country much. This is the third edition. My book's been the first two editions, which you should not buy now because they're nothing compared to this third edition. Japan tried to make an atomic bomb during World War II. Few people know that. And got very close and may have actually made a bomb which they fired off of Korea, which they controlled at the time. But it was too late. They were going to use it on the invasion to the homeland. They were going to use it not to drop on us in America, but on our fleet that was coming in. And it was very feasible. But it was too late. And the Russians, who knew all about it, you know, Korea borders Russia up in the north. And the Russians who knew all about it came in. This was in 1945, right at the end of the war, where they actually, I believe, and there's much evidence to prove, that they fired off a nuclear bomb right off in the water off of Korea. But the Russians came in, and for 2 years, you remember, they kept North Korea totally, and this is in North Korea, totally kept us away. They even shot our planes down there. They were guarding what they were doing. They were looting all of the Japanese factories that were making this bomb, that were involved in that projection. And then they, of course, the Russians were the next major power to have a bomb. Well, part of what they got from Japan in Korea is how they did that. And Japan had a huge industrial complex in North Korea. It stretched all the way from Konan, Korea, or Hungnam today, a little bit south of that, all the way to the northern border. And it was there that they built this bomb and had their program. That's also where they made all kinds of bombs and so on. And we never really knew about it until the end of the war. That's when we found out about it. And anyway, when the war ended and we did find out about it, the Japanese, of course, it's a shock. You know, the Japanese are the only nation in the history of the world that ever had an A-bomb dropped on them. And so politically, it would have been a catastrophe to tell their people that they had one too and would have used it in a second, which they were trying to do. So we needed, on the other side, we, the victors, needed a bulwark place near Russia, some place where we could do our operations against Russia once the Cold War began. So we made a deal with Japan. You give us that ability to operate from where you are and be our friend over there, and we'll keep it quiet. And so it was kept quiet. It was censored. It was not allowed. There was nothing that came out about this, and historians didn't find out about it, and so they never knew about it. And the left especially hates this story. And when I dug it out at first, it was a big book that came out, but it got panned again. I guess my stuff is not liked by the left, but I'm just a journalist. I just go for stories that nobody knows. But anyway, Japan being the sole victim is a myth. They tried very hard. They had a place where they did it. There's tons of information and documents that are top secret that I dug up that shows that they had a vigorous program they had great scientists, and that they may have actually made a bomb. They came right to the brink of that. There's no question about that. When you read my book, it's all one of the things that I did with the new edition that I didn't do. This is an early book. Is I didn't give it enough sourcing, and now there's over 600, 700 footnotes here. There's no way to argue with it. It's all there. And so the idea that they were a victim is a myth, and this is lost history, and it needs to be replaced. The other reason that this is a very important story is that since most of us didn't know this, we didn't really know what in North Korea, as we began to realize that North Korea, this little punk country, is on almost scaring us to death, because they finally did. They took the ruins of what was there in Japan, in Korea, in North Korea. They took those ruins, and that was the beginning of their program. And now they do have nuclear weapons. But one of the things that Japan did was to make a whole series of underground secret places where they make the bombs, and we now know that's true, but we never did map that. And so if we ever got into a situation where we got into a war and we had to get rid of North Korea's nuclear capability, we don't really know where all that is because we disregarded this story. And we must, and by the way, after 2 editions about this, I was contacted by, so the reason that I wrote the 3rd one, really, I was contacted by researchers who are top secret researchers for America. Some of them who had read my earlier books and were aware of the danger that there is there and needed to get the history right. And I found out that they've been using my book to dig into this, but they can't get over there and so on and so forth. So I had these guys who were actually working for the U.S. government, and the story is all in my new edition, the 3rd edition of this, the only one anybody should get. The first 2 are very minimal. The 3rd one has the best and the biggest and the most documented story of this. But so this isn't me talking. When I tell you that it's a national security risk that we don't know about this, I'm talking from those guys, not from myself. And let me next just tell you about how they developed this bomb. Should I go on or should we take a break?
No, we should be going to a break now, but we're not. Oh, okay. Go ahead. Continue.
Okay. Japan, the highly industrial nation, they had great capabilities there, and they had great scientists there. A Japanese scientist, his name was Nagawaka, was really the father of that famous Saturnian model we have of the atom, was swirling around a little ball in there. They figured that out themselves. They had good physicists and so on, and they knew about when it came out in 1938 that there was this thing called fission, and you could make an atomic bomb out of it. They knew about it. They were just as clued in as most big nations, America, and they started a program, but they didn't really put much emphasis on it. They felt that they would start their war and it would end in a couple of years, if not 1 year, and they would win. We would sue for peace, and they would have what they wanted, which was the co-prosperity sphere, which was territory over from Asia and some of the South Pacific and so on. So they didn't need to really do much with this bomb, but they did know about it, and they had good scientists who were right on top of it. I'll name a couple of them. Bunsako Arakatsu was a friend of Einstein's and worked with him. So they were right on with Einstein, and Yashio Nishina, who was really the father of modern physics in Japan. He was a good friend of Niels Bohr, who was crucial in our program and in the rest of nuclear physics. He had a huge place in Tokyo where he was working on this. There were many others. Sagani was actually over here in Southern California working with Ernest Lawrence, who was the 1939 Nobel Prize winner in physics and one of our key scientists. So they were very keyed in, very clued in, and they also knew we were working on a bomb. They knew this from various things. The first one to say is that suddenly all the information was cut off from them. They said, why is America cutting off all? Because they're making the bomb, the one that we all know about and the one that we're going to try to make too, but no problem. We don't need a bomb because it'll take too long to make one. Took us, 4 years? It'll take too long, and pardon me,
we'll win the war before then. America will be, after Pearl Harbor, will win in a year or two, and so we'll never need it. So they started slow. They didn't think they needed this bomb. Things changed, though. And by the way, there was this Nishina, his place was called the Rican, and the Rican was similar to our universities. It had many buildings and professors and so on working on it. And they had programs in Manchuria. They had programs in China, all of which are in my book. I've got it all in there. And so these programs are starting up, but they're going slow. But as the war dragged on, the nuclear priority became bigger, and it got bigger and bigger till finally, by the end of the war, and we're bombing Japan proper, it became a top priority. And for a while, the Army and the Navy had separate programs where they used different scientists. And if you think we have, what do you call those things where competitions, the Army and the Navy almost kill each other. They're so separate. And so it took a while for them to get together and realize, hey, we've got to put these differences away and get together. And they did. And by the end of the war, we're bombing Japan mercilessly, but we have no idea what's going on over in this huge area of North Korea. And also there's a whole story of how even before the war, Japanese geologists started looking for uranium, and they found other fissionable elements like thorium and so on. And in Japan, they were making all of the pilot industries that you needed for this. And when the bombing increased of Japan, they moved it all over to Korea. And that's where it ended up. And there's a famous story, there's an interesting story that when Germany was, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm just listening.
I've been talking so much, I'm kind of losing where I am here. Anyway, at the end of the war, the Germans, who knew that they were going to have a problem, and we're going to lose the war, they finally yielded. Okay, I'll wait. We'll tell this story. It's about a submarine, the last submarine to leave Germany, and it's interesting.
Okay, we'll be right back.
RBN, the Republic Broadcasting Network.
Wilcox, and his website is robertkwilcox.com, and we are talking about his book, which is titled Japan's Secret War, How Japan's Race to Build Its Own Atomic Bomb Provided the Groundwork for North Korea's Nuclear Program. It's in its third edition, revised and updated. Okay. So,
all right. I think we left off. I was going to tell you the story of U-234, which was a submarine, a German submarine, and as the war ended for Japan, for Germany, only Japan was left to fight. So Germany, which had been back and forth with helping the Japanese on their nuclear program, but there's not much information on that. I suspect they did more than we know about right now. But anyway, they put on this submarine some uranium. Now, you know, uranium comes in various forms. The stuff that blows up in a bomb is not just raw or uranium. There's a tiny fraction, I mean atom-sized fraction, tiny bit of the uranium. It's called U-235. That's the explodable uranium. And what you do is you have to, the hard part of making an atomic bomb is taking out of regular uranium this explodable uranium. I'm using very basic terms here. It's not that easy, but and you do this with separators, and separators are huge machines which, through various methods, separate the hard uranium from the U-235, and you eventually get little pieces of it, and then bigger pieces, and it takes months to do this. Today they can do it much easier, but it's still a hard process. So what was on this submarine is not clear, but there's much evidence to believe that it was highly radioactive. So it might have been U-235, the explodable uranium, or it could have been some amount of that along the way, which still could explode. You could get it together, and then your problem is you need to get 2 lumps of uranium, of explodable uranium, to come together fast enough that it causes a explosion. So most of the time it would fizzle out, but that's what you wanted. And so this submarine left Kiel, Germany, just at the end of the war, March or May, I forget the exact time, and had to make its way through the English Channel, which it did, and then it was en route to Japan. But en route, once they got out to the Atlantic, the crew, which had 2 Japanese on it, because they had come from Japan to marshal this thing, to be there when these things were put on the submarine, they decided, wait a minute, why are we going to Japan? Japan's going to lose too. So they decided to give up to America, and they took their cargo instead, and it was quite a wild ride because they had to keep that quiet, because all of the Allies were looking for this submarine, and they kind of did a diversion, but finally ended up in New England. I forget the exact place where they landed, but when they landed, Oppenheimer, who headed our program, the chief scientist in he came down there. On the Manhattan Project, exactly. Mm-hmm. And he came down there, and so did Groves, and it was all top secret stuff. They took that away, and where it went, we don't know for sure, but some experts, and I say experts, a top dog guy involved in all of this at that time, he believes it went into the one of the bombs we dropped on Japan. You know, we were having a tough time getting enough explodable uranium to even put into bombs. When we dropped our 2 bombs, we didn't have a third one ready yet. And so here is a bunch of stuff that might have been ready right. So anyway, it was dropped in there. So that's the story of U-235 in a nutshell. And U-234, which in itself is weird, isn't it? Explodable uranium is U-235, and the designation of this U-boat is U-234. Weird, but that's a story which lends itself to those, and I can go many ways now to talk about this, but I'm just a writer who looks for good stories, and when I found out about this, because I wrote. I read in the New York Times about a Spanish spy who had uncovered actually uncovered the fact that Japan had worked on a bomb. And to me, that was a great story. This is in the 80s, and nobody knew that Japan had worked. You know, the secrecy was so great. So this story is so squelched by the left, which only wants Japan to look like a victim. And in Japan itself, and by the way, my first two editions did not get published in Japan, but this one has. Japan finally has admitted it was true. And I was published by a big publisher, as well as here, too, but in Japan. So, this was not, it's not known here. And I mean, I can't tell you the number of supposed great scholars who all come out in the New York Times and so on and say, oh, this is not true. Japan's program was no more than a gleam in their eyes. Well, first of all, they're actually admitting that they had a program. And once my first edition came out, they came out with, you know, this is so far hyped, it didn't happen. So I wrote, it so happened that a good publisher, Marlowe, picked it up for a second edition 10 years later. The first edition was 1985, the second edition was 1995, and the proof that it was not a lie, that somebody, a publisher, would stake their reputation on it, was that Marlowe published in 1995. And I would have left it alone. But then again, they said, okay, they got pretty far. They did do a little work on it. They did do some spade work and so on, but they never got near making a bomb. Well, that made me mad, you know, and when these guys called me from our security, I'm trying to think of it now, not the State Defense Department, who actually work for the American government, and who said they carried my book around with them and used it because they're afraid that they haven't found all the things that were in North Korea that the Japanese had made. I said, well, I'm going to really do this right. I'm going to make it so it's so detailed. I'm going to go back. And by the way, I went to Japan and spent 3 weeks there interviewing. I interviewed all the people in the program. And this was what these so-called scholars were saying wasn't true. It's amazing they can do something like that, but that's what they did. Well, it went from okay, maybe they wanted to do it, but it didn't work. Okay, maybe they got a little far, to this, and I haven't heard a word from anybody. And Japan just published it, saying it was true. There's a whole group of ex-generals and so on which back it now. So anyway. When I first got onto it, I went to Japan, I interviewed all the scientists, everybody who was involved in this, all first-hand accounts, came back.
They were still alive?
Oh, yeah, they were all alive at this time. Not Nishina, not the head scientists. They had died, but people involved in the program. Scientists themselves who were involved in the program. People who had first-hand knowledge, not people who tell me, oh, I knew a guy who did it. No, these are people who were in it. Now, all they could do for me was say, yes, we had a program. Yes, it involved this way. Yes, we got this far. And what the upshot of it all was, that in Japan proper, they did the pilot program. Pilot program means they worked out how to do it, when to do it, what they would need, and they were in the meantime gathering uranium other thorium and other fissionable materials all over the Asian continent, which is one of the things they gave to North Korea. North Korea had the benefit of all of their mines. Today, they still use them. So they were doing all the pilot stuff. And then this is what I found out the first time for my first edition, and which is now in here, but bolstered much more with more information. From Korea, for instance, I found people who said, yes, we worked on that. But you have to understand that in the Korea, they were as secret as we were, and they would break it up into the people who piled the dirt, the people who moved into this. So it's hard to do, and I don't think you've ever been to Korea. I haven't either. I mean, North Korea, it's hard to do. So I had to leave it by going to Japan.
Yes. The only place I've been in the Orient is China.
You've been there, huh?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, okay. Well, I could go to China, but I just didn't have the money, so your advances only go that so far. You can only can only do so far. So anyway, I went. One of the things that I found, first of all, this story that Japan had made an atomic bomb was the headline on a lot of big papers in 1946. And that's another thing that keyed me into this in the beginning. It was written by another CIC, you know, those guys that I talked about in the first book,
yes.
The Patton book. These guys who are sort of the FBI of intelligence. They go in and they make one of those intelligence guys interviewed a Japanese who said he had worked on the bomb, that they had made it and had fired off a test bomb off of Korea, and basically laid out much of the framework of what I would be working on for the rest of my life, I guess we're talking about here on this book. And so I started by that, and that led me to the National Archives, where luckily I went to the National Archives, and I asked the head archivist there, great man, Taylor was his name, he's dead now, to help me. He says, well, you know, all the stuff, and the best stuff I could get would be, you know, CIA and it all came through the occupation. So he brought me down to this new wing, which is no longer in existence, but it was a wing where they had all of the papers had been dumped into boxes, and nobody had gone through them. I was going to be looking at stuff that nobody had seen since the war had ended. It just hadn't been filed by the National Archives. So I was able to go through some of this. You couldn't, it was acres and acres. I could go through some. He brought me what he thought might bring me some information. And one of the things I found was something called, well, there's so many good things I found, but I'll start with this A-bomb report. It turned out that after the war, we began to put two and two together. And the Japanese understandably lied through their teeth. But all of the scientists who had been working on this said now they were working on peaceful things, but they would go to their labs and find radioactivity. They would find books that logged in how they were separating uranium from, and they found the uranium. They found tons of uranium. Not all of it separated, don't misunderstand me, but tons of uranium, which, by the way, was another good thing we could do to keep secret. We started taking all of the uranium that was in Japan. So I'm finding information about this, and so is America, and I'm certainly can see some of the head people here going crazy, saying, "My God, they may have done it." Luckily we beat them; they're not going to get it. But what did the Russians get from them? Which we know occurred. For 2 years, they kept us out of North Korea. I don't know if you remember that history, but they shot down American planes that were buzzing over Conan, where the actual bomb was made. By this time, we're looking at it, and this A-bomb report. Anyway, we sent a bunch of special what was the report they did in Germany, and they tried to find out what the Germans had done. I forget the name of it, but this is the same thing, huh?
I'm thinking. Was it where? Who did they say did it?
You remember,
did the report?
We were afraid of what the Germans had done. We didn't even know the Japanese had done anything until after the war. But before the war, right as the war ended, we sent in a special secret investigation to find out what the Germans had done, and we got a bunch of German scientists out of it. But anyway,
Paperclip. You're thinking about Paperclip.
No, Paperclip is taking the German scientists back here. But the way we found out about Paperclip,
but it was a little bit weird how they did
anyway. We did the same thing in Japan, and I'm going to get quick to it, but first of all, they lied about what they'd done, and luckily, some in the A-bomb investigation realized it and sent a second report, and that's when we began to realize, hey, a lot happened here, and it happened in North Korea, and we don't know anything about it. So we began to try to find out stuff, and we had nobody in North Korea. We couldn't get any information. What I found in these files, which were given to me, which they never do today, but were given to me, and I'm fishing through them, I found CIA reports that are incredible. And they basically say, we are getting reports that the Japanese had a big program here in Hungnam, Korea, and throughout the Russian peninsula, and that they made a bomb, and that they fired it off the coast. This is where this guy first got that 1946 article. That's where it came from. And they fired it off, but the Russians came in and took it, and they spent 2 years looting the plants, took it all back to Russia. And when they finally got through with that, they said, here, North Korea, little fledgling country, you can have now the ruins. And and they got a system of electricity that you can't make this without, you can't make a bomb without the electrical grid that the Japanese had put there. They got a system of underground laboratories that North Korea today is using. So all of this came out of these top secret CIA reports that I was getting, and it even named doctors who were involved in it. The Japanese, mostly making a bomb after you've done the physics of it is not a real physics problem. It's an engineering problem. And if you're familiar with Japanese culture, it's a cultural thing. They had engineers over there. They did have physicists, and some of them were reported being there. But the main thing is they had engineers over there. And those engineers were taken and tortured, and I have reports about how they were, tortured with fire, and guys would die rather than tell the truth. And it's just an amazing story.
Okay, we're going to a break, and we do have a couple callers on the line, so we'll be right back.
Starts with you and me. It starts with you and me. We all can be heroes.
All righty, we are back. And our guest is Robert K. Wilcox. Do you want to take a couple of callers?
Sure.
Excuse me. Okay, Chance, welcome.
Yes, hello, Deanna. Hello, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Wilcox, this is a real treat for me because George Smith Patton is a personal hero of mine. Ever since he said we fought the wrong enemy, meaning we should have been fighting Russia.
Yes.
I had relatives who lived under Russian communism before they fled to the United States. Before I get to my question, Mr. Wilcox, I have a couple of pictures of, I don't know if you remember, George Patton's faithful, devoted pet dog, that white bull terrier.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and I also remember reading he took a white riding horse from Hitler and he gave it to Emperor Hirohito. I remember reading that. Now here's my question. Here's my question to you, Mr. Wilcox. Now I know George Patton had one son and two daughters who probably died by now, I would imagine. But I saw in a picture dated 1945 when he returned home here. He had 4 grandchildren by his side, 3 boys and a girl. And I would assume they're probably in their late 70s or 80s now if they're still alive. Would you happen to know if he has any, if they are alive, or does he have any living relatives to this day?
Yeah, that's a good question. As I think I explained that one of his granddaughters went to Europe, and she had a discussion with someone who claimed to be a Russian agent and who said that her grandfather had been murdered. And when the book came out, there were a lot of people who wanted to have his body exhumed, and
Right.
And they actually formed a group, and they went to the family, and the family said no. And the reason was, in my summation, I'm getting very a long story short, but I think they didn't want his name mired in something like this, where he was murdered, rather than his great reputation and so on. That's what I think. But anyway, and his son had a meeting with Douglas Bazada, who is one of the key witnesses in my book, the former spy, and Jedburgh, and the guy who says that he caused the accident. They had an actual meeting because Bazada wanted to tell this story, and I think it was the National Enquirer was going to run something about it, and so they brought the son, and the son was very antagonistic to Bazada. It's a good thing they didn't get in a fight, because Bazada would have killed him. But this was a big son too. But he said, "I don't believe this. You're not telling the truth." And Bazada kept it. Said, "Yes, I am. This is what happened." And let me tell you, my book is based a lot on 41 secret diaries that Bazada kept for himself, in which he agonized over this. He agonized over it. And so I don't doubt. I met Bazada. I've seen his diaries. This occurred. He was asked to kill him. And
now the son was
I don't have any doubt about that.
The son was named George too, wasn't he?
I'm sorry?
Yes, sir. The son was named George also, wasn't he?
Yes, and he was a high-ranking general.
Now I take it he passed away too, right? It must have.
I think he's gone now. I don't think there's much. There certainly are family left, but they just didn't take to this. They didn't like it, but they never. Nobody, rebutted me or anything. They just didn't want to be involved, and I contacted them many times.
They want to put the memory to rest. They should, though. They should investigate it, really. I remember you mentioned earlier in the broadcast about those 2 nurses. I remember in 1975, I was a teenager. I remember, was that in Ann Arbor, Michigan, wasn't it?
It was.
VA hospital?
That's it. You got it.
Yeah, there were 2 Filipino nurses, young Filipino nurses, and I think after a couple of months or so, they found them innocent. I remember that.
What happened was, yes, that's very true. They were found guilty, but it was overturned.
Huh.
Yeah, and I think they
Which is legitimate. I'm not saying it wasn't legitimate, but from what I know of what happened there, I think it was a political decision completely. And read my book and you'll see why. But my book is, that was an early book I wrote, and it's going to be hard to find, but buy my new Japan Secret War instead.
Yeah, I think those two nurses injected people with some form of that Curaire that caused respiratory. Yeah, I remember that. I was a teenager then. It's surprising I remember. Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilcox, for taking my call. Thank you, too, Diana, now.
Okay, thank you. All righty, we're going to a break. We'll be right back, and we'll take that other call.
Starts with you and me. It starts with you and me. We all can be heroes if
all righty, welcome back. This is Deanna.
To change the bad to good.
Our guest is Robert K. Wilcox. His website is robertkwilcox.com. And we do have another caller, Dr. Kelly in California. Welcome.
Oh, hey, Deanna. Thank you so much again for another stellar interview and guest. I wasn't able to get through last week, but I did want to pass a little info along to you. If I could get your P.O. box or something from the engineer, I would really appreciate it. And I would love to order your book about the Sandy Hook thing. And I've been taking in small doses of the human radiation experiments when I can handle a bit of that at a time.
Ooh,
and
what are you doing?
The human radiation experiments.
I wouldn't be doing that at all.
Well, reading the book, I have to know the horrible truth, and I would like to see a compilation of good men and women and actually do more of a grand jury type of investigation instead of dragging everything back out into the public and trying to make a spectacle of it, as they did in the human radiation experiments and some of the ancillary documents. And thank you for your work as well, and the info coming out, and wow.
One of the things that came across my path, came across my path several years ago, but with radiation, there used to be lead paint. Lead paint was used on a lot of homes. It was used all over. It was just something that was used as a standard. And then somebody said, "Oh, no, we can't have lead paint because little children might swallow a piece of lead paint." So whenever they want to make a law, they say, "Oh, we've got to protect the children." And so the reason that they got rid of lead paint is so that they could radiate people through their house walls. And anyway, that was just something. But I don't know. I wouldn't participate in any radiation activities.
No, I'm just reading the book to get the knowledge, wisdom from, the horrible thing, and, taking in a small chapter here and there, or just a couple of pages, because it's so horrible that I can only, take it in small doses. But it's interesting covering the TBI, the total body irradiation, and those plutonium injections and all of this.
Oh my gosh.
Madness, just brutality and madness, and we're not buying the falsely so-called science anymore. And thank you for pointing things out and all your stellar work. It's amazing that that you're able to do this, and so thank you so much again.
Oh, well, you're certainly welcome. Thank you for your phone call. Okay. Let's take Pat real quick in Fort Worth. Pat?
Hi, a couple of things. First, I really think that we should work with these insurance companies that the people have to have for the 20% of their Social Security, to try to get them to give us one autopsy of our choice, of the people who left when we die, their choice, or put it somehow, you know, in the VA too, because I mean, you know, it's too many people getting killed, and you have to wonder forever what it was. That's crazy. And the second one, I'll just go ahead and ask it and get off, is thorium. You mentioned thorium, but I forgot what you said about it, or I didn't hear it or something. Thorium.
Is that for me?
Uh-huh. You mentioned the...
Is that for me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
You mentioned thorium. Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned thorium because it was being gathered by the Japanese as part of a possible bomb. I don't know if they used the thorium or not, but they certainly were digging it up and that kind of thing. So that's how I mentioned it.
Oh, well, maybe Dr. Kelly still is, because I was wondering what they actually do use it for. It's radiation, right? Radioactive. So, but I read it wasn't good enough for that. So, well, anyway, I'll let you go. Maybe other people have more to say. Thank you.
Okay,
bye-bye.
Thank you. Okay, I don't think we have any other callers. Okay.
All right, I can go on a little bit.
Sure, yes.
Here, I think I left off where they were, the Russians took these engineers and scientists and tortured them, and for 2 years they reaped there are reports of Russian submarines coming into Conan, and there would be all this fire and very interesting. They were picking something up during that time, and you know, when the Korean War began, I found and I've been told about numerous reports of actually bombers targeting, quote, atomic plants in Korea. These would have been in the Conan area, which was the main area where they are said to have had it. And even so far as I don't know how much you know about the audience knows about the Korean War, but as we were coming up into North Korea before it had been before the war ended at Hungnam, Hanson Baldwin is a famous New York Times writer. And he writes a story that he went in with these troops who were looking for the atomic works in Conan, and that he found it. He says he encountered these huge works. So, and that's not the only time the New York Times would collect that. We know today the New York Times is just has its own agenda now and isn't like it was then. But in '46, they pretty much did a pretty good job. By the way, myself, I worked for the New York Times as a stringer, which means in an area that they needed someone in there. So I know a little bit about that. That's my journalistic background. But anyway, so during the war, this area that was identified in all of these CIA top secret documents that I found was actually bombed, and they blew it to smithereens. So I don't know what happened there, but it didn't matter. The North Koreans, when they took it over, they really reaped a lot of good stuff in the sense of the network that had already been built by the Japanese, the electrical grid, number one, the mines where they were mining the atomic, uranium and so on, and the underground places. And they built there the first area that North Korea began to build its nuclear program. And this is little known because, as I said, we really didn't have the good idea about it, was the Conan area, the Hungnam area. We don't really, when you look for documents, for instance, on the internet, you'll go back to about 1956, and that's when they say they started their program, and it'll be around Conan. But it was really started during World War II. We didn't realize this. It was so secret that we didn't get into it, and now we're trying to fill in the holes.
Wow. In your book, you mentioned Unit 731 a couple of times.
Yes. That is not part of my story, but that unit was in Manchuria. And, you know, the Japanese, when they went into China and Manchuria in particular, they were ruthless, and there were terrible things they did. And there is this unit which was supposedly, and probably very much so, doing experiments on especially Asians, but also even so much so as American POWs that might have been unlucky enough to be captured in that area. And the essence of that was that their doctors, for some hideous reason, did not want to give these people, when they cut their arms off or blew up grenades and any kind of anesthesia, because they felt that would taint the data. So they would tie a guy up and then blow a grenade next to him, or do an operation on someone without anesthesia and take out organs from his body. You can imagine. I mean, this is stuff I don't even like to talk about. They did that, and a lot of this was kept quiet because there was this alliance between us and the Japanese after the war. The big enemy was Russia, and we needed Japan's help in keeping our bases and being our ally as we fought the Russians. And so all of this stuff was, now those experiments in Asia did get, there have been books written about them, but they're not as kept secret as Japan's attempt to make an atomic bomb, which is the one that I talk about.
Mm-hmm. Mm. I recently read a book titled Poisoner in Chief, and it's about the CIA search for mind control and all of the people that our CIA used and drugged, and it's unbelievable what our CIA has been involved with.
I'm aware of that, and I've done work on that, and it's true. When this, especially the mind things, LSD and that kind of stuff. But
right.
I mean, there are all kinds of, when a government is going to do that. Less government is better government. But when you have a national government and you have war is hell, and it brings out all this horror.
Yes, I don't believe that we were put on the earth to kill each other. So, and also, you did mention 731 and the terrible things that occurred, but the soldiers that the U.S. sends out to kill others, to Japan or wherever, they're sort of mentally geared to be just as cruel as you depict in your book, as the Japanese were. Some of the things that, for instance, some of the Americans would cut off a guy's head, a Japanese head, boil it, and send it home for a souvenir.
I'm not
terrible.
My feeling is, first of all, war is hell. You get people into war, and they're going to do things that are horrible. War is hell. It's something terrible.
It is.
I don't think we did it in any great degree. It did happen, not as much as the Japanese did. It's a difference in their outlook on life. They considered battle a glorious thing. We didn't do that, and therefore they would, anyone who shook from it would do some nasty things. But there are atrocities in all wars. I personally look at the government for that, and we were attacked by the Japanese, so we hit them back, and you do that, you're going to get that. If you start a war, since World War II, we've gone into areas, and we've just been there for really no good reason. Not all the times, but some of the times, and the less war we have, the less atrocity we're going to have. But humans are humans. They are not Jesus. They are not God, who would presumably do only good things to us. But it's going to happen. Stay out of war. But sometimes somebody wants you to go to war. If they hit you, you've got to hit them back.
Well, I think there's always reasons for war, and I've read a lot about Japan. I've read the Seagraves books, which are very interesting, and I don't know why I am attracted to war, because it's a hideous, horrible subject, and I don't understand why it's a crime. If I went next door and shot my neighbor, I would be arrested for murder. But if the government sends you to kill strangers in a strange land, then you're a hero. And I don't see it as being different. I just don't think we should be killing each other.
Well, what about intention? And you take a soldier, he's put into that. He's defending his country. I'm not excusing any bad behavior, but to me, there's a great difference between defending your country and going next door and murdering your neighbor. That's a purely personal thing to gain something. No, I don't see the same. I certainly agree with you that war is terrible and we shouldn't do it unless we have to. You can't just let people come in and kill you. You have to defend yourself. Defending yourself is different than murder. That's my opinion.
Okay. All righty, we're going to take a break. We'll be right back. With our guest, Robert K. Wilcox. You are a real trooper. A lot of people would get totally worn out with 3 hours of divulging a bunch of information. So I must say you're a real trooper. And you also have a very good phone connection. It's been very clear, and so you're on a landline, right?
That's good. Well, I guess we don't have much time left, do we?
We do have another caller. Do you want to take another caller? Or do you...
Sure.
Okay, let's take James. This is James in James.
Yes. Good afternoon.
Yes. Hi.
I spent 28 years in Taiwan, and I did a lot of walking around there, and I can attest to the fact of the sophistication of the Japanese infrastructure who were in Taiwan from the latter part of the 19th century until 1945.
Yeah.
The Japanese were very advanced. I had friends who fought the Japanese in Burma, and he was complaining that his rifle, which had been designed in Canada by a Canadian engineer, was useless, and that the Japanese had better equipment, they had better rifles, they had a lot of things that were better than Allied troops. And it doesn't surprise me about the nuclear program because it was a Japanese physicist that actually was first to postulate the meson theory of attraction between one nuclei and another. That was Kawa, I believe.
Yeah, exactly.
So when it comes to war, I did a master's degree in international relations and strategic studies. And wars are, as you say, they're hell, but it's interesting that wars are actually created as well. The countries have been doing that, nations have been doing that, and one of the books I'm looking at right now is Thucydides, the Peloponnesian War, and also Machiavelli. So wars are actually created by human beings, and of course they create them, and then people go out and fight them. And so that was my observation. That,
thank you. Thank you.
Sorry?
We are out of time, so I'm going to have to cut you loose. But thank you for your thoughts, James. I appreciate that.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So, we are out of time. And again, thank you for being on the program. And I love the book, Target Patton. What an awful thing. What an awful thing. And I in the back of my mind, I think they probably knocked off his wife too. It's
a possibility, that's for sure.
Yes.
Well, thank you, Deanna. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Take care and have a good rest of the week. Okay. Take care. Bye now.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye-bye, listeners. Talk with you next week.